Good evening. It is Tuesday, the 24th of September, 2024. It is 8 p.m. UK time, and this is 45 Day Show, episode 32. I've got someone on the show who I met actually at the same event that I met Rival Self, who's also been on the show before. And it was a Mr. Bongo event. I think it was a hip hop event over in Brighton. And he had the new 7-inch record from his label Weaponize Records that he was releasing. He very kindly gifted it to me, and I took it away, and I loved it. It's brilliant. And then we've bumped into each other at a couple of things here and there, but there's a lot going on with the label, really interestingly, because it's not just vinyl, it's also mixtapes and involving some really interesting DJs in the label. So I thought it'd be good to get him on and have a chat and find out a bit more about what's going on. So before I do, here he is. It is Guy Harris.
Hello, Criztoz.
How you doing, mate? It's good to have you on.
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an unusual one for this because normally I see guests on my show online first, and then I usually meet them in person. But with us, it's sort of the other way around. The other way around, which is.
I've got to correct you. Actually, the first time we met was at I think it was the first ever Get Down, which is
of course, Andre, one of a kind. So that was before. Okay, so that was before the Mr. Bongo thing. Okay.
Yeah, that was before the Mr. Bongo thing. Yeah, but I mean, I started Weaponize Records at that point, but I just hadn't really released anything, so it was all just guts and glamour. You know, things are coming.
Yeah, definitely. Well, no, I mean it's great to have you on. So we've got a lot to talk about. But with
take off my glasses because I've got a lot of glare there. I can see.
Okay, no worries. With all my guests, the first time they come on the show, I always like to find out more about what got them into music. So I know I've been into music from a young age, and pretty much everyone I speak to who's in the music business or DJ, producer, whatever now, has got a story because it's normally from a young age. So for you, who was it who first sort of got you into music, and what sort of music was it at the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I have a sister, but I'm the the older sibling. So I didn't have older brothers necessarily who were connecting me with music. But my best friend and someone I've known for a very long time, a guy called Clive Dickinson, his brother Lee, who was about 5 years older than us, was an avid music fan. And I mean, we're going back to sort of like 76, 77. So we would listen to the sort of music that he was collecting. And obviously around that time, it was a lot of punk music. As well as sort of ska. But I mean, I guess I grew up in a pretty amazing time for music because, although I was born right at the end of the 60s, the last of the flower children, so to speak, I missed all of that prog rock stuff. But by the time I started developing an interest in music got interesting again. So it was things like punk, X-Ray Specs, Sex Pistols, and on. And a lot of ska, a lot of two-tone. So that was the stuff that was kind of floating around the playground, really. And we were all into it at that time. So really, I guess it was down to my friend's brother, who largely played us a lot of music, dressed us up as sort of token punks and stuff, and bizarre times. And it's funny, really. I mean, there was a guy called Freddie Laver as well, who had come over from America, and he was a really keen drummer, and he went on to be a drummer with Temple Tudor, and he introduced us to a lot of music as well. So yeah, it's just a mad, eclectic mix of stuff in the early days. I mean, the first record I bought, I believe, was a 45, and it was yellow. I think that's what attracted me to it first off. And that was the Banana Song by the Dickies, which was, a takeoff of Tra La 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 La, but it lasted all of like 1 minute and 22 seconds or something. And then it was things like Ian Dury and the Blockheads. I remember playing the B-side to Hit Me With Your Ribbon Stick to my mother, and it had some swearing on it, and she was a bit sort of taken aback by that. But, my mum was always musical. So, I kind of grew up to a very different sound, listening to her music, things like Billie Holiday and a lot of soul and a lot of jazz, things like Art Tatum and Duke Ellington, and that old big band jazz sound, you know.
Yeah, amazing. I'm going to say hello to a couple of people, and then I'll pick you up on a couple of points there. So, good evening, Twitch,
Ah,
and good evening, Sam Tweaks. Long time no speak. It was
hello, Sam.
we were just talking about you, Sam, but yeah, a couple of days ago. And yeah, thank you. We've got some people over on Instagram as well. So, if you're on Instagram, then yeah, come down, come over to Twitch and join the conversation. But yeah, so you talked about your first record. Where
Yeah.
did you buy that from?
Well, if you ask Mr. Thing, he'll remember this shop because we're from the same town, you see, a sleepy town called Sevenoaks in Kent, and it was called the Spinning Disc, and that's where I bought my first record. And they had like like a bargain bucket as well, and used to have like 7 inches in sawdust and sort of like shredded paper, and you used to literally you pay your money first, and then you dip your hand in and you pulled out the record and you got what you got at the end of the day. There was no
Like a
proof.
proper lucky dip, then.
It was a proper lucky dip. Yeah, I mean
Amazing.
that's where all the crap ended up. Obviously, I don't think there's anything good in there, if I'm honest with you. But yeah, those were the days. The days of early vinyl, and then I think my first album, I think it may have been Grease, if I'm honest with you. The soundtrack, but we'll skip that one. After
Oh,
that, it
I'm
was
gonna pause you there because one of my earliest memories is literally sitting in this room. 'Cause this house used to belong to my parents, with a
okay.
record player at about 5 years old with the Grease soundtrack. So it's definitely something that's ingrained in my head. But yeah,
Yes, it had a massive effect when it came out, and there was no couldn't really escape it, to be honest. But my first proper 12-inch or vinyl, I guess, would have been LP rather, would have been Armed Forces by Albert Costello and the Attractions, and I still
well,
have it somewhere amongst all of my vinyl, which is just ridiculous. It's taking over the place.
yeah. I'm gradually trying to tidy up my stuff, but there is records like all over the floor.
Yeah,
It's a problem. It's a problem. It's an addiction, and it's a
it
problem.
is an addiction.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today that I'm sort of I'm preparing a set for a couple of weeks time, and I was like, oh, I need to get some more records, and then I'm buying records, and then realizing I've got records sitting here that I haven't listened to yet that are probably just as good as anything I'm buying now. But
Don't get me
anyway,
started. I've got stuff I haven't even taken out of the cling film, which is
yeah,
maddening, really. I heard something not so long ago. Someone said, if you get your kids into vinyl, they won't have any money for drugs.
yeah, yeah. That's a
Which,
that's a classic
which
meme. It's very true, very true. Especially with the cost of 45s and albums and everything else these days.
yes, it's
But
getting crazy. But I mean, it costs a hell of a lot of money to produce vinyl these
yeah,
days.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you can't get around it. I mean, and it's kind of, you don't want to pass on the costs. I mean, if you pressed like 1,000 or 5,000 or something, then obviously the cost will come right down. But I mean, it's selling albums and selling vinyl these days. It's a tough business, but I guess we'll talk about that later.
yeah. We'll come back to that. There's lots of points that we can definitely sort of talk about that. Okay, so you've described sort of buying your first records,
Yeah,
and all of that. So how did it then progress in terms of the style of music? Because obviously one of the things we're going to be talking about is hip hop. So how did you first then get into hip hop from that sort of early age of listening to ska and jazz and everything else that was around at that time?
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't give interviews very often, and apologies if I find myself repeating myself from the last one I did, which was almost 1 year ago to the day. Um, and shout out to Nostalgic, my brother over in Chicago, who gave the interview, or rather interviewed me. Um, yeah, I mean, been listening to a lot of heavy sounds, so a lot of punk, and then cross over to two tone, the specials and selector especially. Still love that sound today. In fact, I've gone back because I've lost so many records over the years. It's a crying shame actually, and I've had to go back and pay an awful lot of money for 7 inches and albums that are now worth a fortune. Um,
Yeah.
but it was really '79 when Rapper's Delight landed. Um, and that was the first time that I really heard this, unique, different sound, something that was radically different from everything else we'd been listening to. I mean, yeah, we were listening to some disco because some of that had crossed into the charts, of course, so there was no avoiding it. But in terms of, like, what we now call rapping, speaking over a beat, albeit very fast and, lyrical and rhyming, that was so uniquely different at the time that you couldn't help but just kind of, your ears pricked up and you couldn't help but listen to it. And it was just infectious, really. So that's the first hip hop record, and my first hip hop memory, I would say. And that was 79, late 79, 1980 at the latest.
And did you hear that first before you picked it up, or did you pick it up in the record shop? Where did you actually first?
I never bought it at the time.
Okay,
I never bought it at the time, and I don't know why exactly, but I didn't, because obviously it sold millions and went on to make lots of people a lot of money. Um, but no, I mean, it was everywhere at one point. It was always
yeah,
on the radio. I mean, I didn't buy a lot of records because a lot of my friends' brothers had records, so we just kind of creep into their rooms when they weren't around and play their vinyl.
right.
And we had one kind of suitcase record player in our house, and that was my mum's, and again, I would creep into the front room and play that when she wasn't around, because she was very precious about, her Billie Holiday records and stuff, and those soul jams that she had. Um, but I mean, that was probably the first hip hop. In fact, that was the first hip hop track I heard, even if you could call it hip hop at the time. I mean, again, as I've said before, Deborah Harry coined the phrase hip hop, and that's when it kind of came into the fore a bit more, I guess. Seeing Rapture, and then seeing some of the
Yeah,
elements of hip hop in the video,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
even remember where I was, and what I was doing at the time, and that really resonated with me enormously, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing video even now to sort of go back and watch
Mm.
it, but the impact it had and the fact that it was so different to what else was going on is a real evolution of music, wasn't it? You could sort of see it happening in front of you,
Oh, absolutely.
and I think that then sped up, didn't it? Because hip hop then just quickly sort of started to take over, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like to go as far as saying that she championed it, but I guess she did, really. Um, I mean, we all know the story. We've all seen, the World Style, which is meant to be loosely based on Deborah Harry, and um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess she brought a lot of this to the fore, and it wasn't long after, really, that then I was listening to, like, things like Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and then it really got going and it picked up pace very quickly after that.
Yeah. So what were the sort of next sort of stage of records that you then started buying after that? I know you didn't buy that one, but what was it
Yeah,
hip hop
well,
wise that you started buying?
I mean, we were getting a lot of things on tape, actually.
Okay.
um, I had, again, I had, friends who had relatives in New York, and a lot of these early electro tracks like Nucleus and stuff like that were coming to us via C90s, you know,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
and these mixtapes were coming our way. So that's how we were getting some of our early hip hop sort of exposure. Um, and really, not an awful lot was being put out on record at that time, if you recall. Um, I mean, I saw Justin, Mr. Fantastic, talk about Genius of Rap, and yeah,
Yeah.
we all got that. But I mean, it was really Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, that came out, and then people started thinking, well, actually, we can actually put this medium, we can put this genre on record, and people are going to buy it. Um, and then for me, I guess it was just regular trips up to London, and a lot of my friends would buy clothes and we'd go up to London, and I would, I didn't necessarily have an awful lot of money in my pocket, but at that time, vinyl was a lot cheaper. Even US imports were cheaper, and I would come away with a 12-inch or two, things like Spider D or whatever, whoever it was, and I already bought a lot of records by this point. Um, But you know, we used to go and frequent Spats, the nightclub up in Tottenham Court Road, which was run by Tim Westwood. Tim
Right.
Westwood. But I mean, I was seeing Ewan over in Rare Kind in Brighton the other day, and and I just come across this record. It was like Spats, and it had interviews on it and stuff like that. And I was like, no way! And
Amazing.
and I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it. I wanted to, but I've got to try and sort out all my records before I start buying crazy stuff that I'll probably play once and never again.
Yeah.
But I should have done. I'm kicking myself that I didn't. In fact, I've reminded myself to ask him if he still got it. And the first thing I heard on it was Break Array. Someone referenced this guy, and I remember Break Array in Spats because he used to do crazy windmills and head spins and stuff. But I mean, we were going up to London and we were going to that, and that was a tiny dive basement. I mean, it was so small, but it felt so big to us at the time. I mean, I was probably about 14 or something when we were going to that. Definitely the youngest there, wearing ski salopettes and stuff, and ski goggles around the neck. And we would, start probably at Covent Garden and end up at Covent Garden, which was very much the meeting place. So you used to have people like Sifo there, beatboxing in the early days. It was just, and you used to have like Trailblazers. Trailblazers, partly became Chrome Angels, and it was just this hub, this meeting place. And you used to go there, and you had the opera house there, and it was surrounded by builders boards and just covered by the dopest graffiti. I mean, even then, these guys were just extraordinary. So it was the early explosion of hip hop in London, really. Unfortunately, we lived about 30 minutes away on the train, so we were always going up and just checking out the lines and and getting the vibes and and just buying stuff.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing times, and obviously very different to now. These are sort of days before the internet, before sort of mobile phones, all of that sort of side of things.
No, none of that.
So getting to these events, was a real mission.
It was, you'd have flyers and word of mouth, and
Yeah.
that's how you used to do it. And, asking people, where's this? Because you had no idea where it was, relying on, strangers to hopefully direct you in the right, the right direction.
Yeah. I had that. I think I remember the first time I went to Fabric, I didn't know where the hell it was, and we were just asking everyone for directions, and
Yeah.
eventually got there. But yeah, before Google Maps and all of that.
No Google Maps.
Yeah, definitely. So let's sort of fast forward a little bit. So that's sort of early then. So how did music play a part in your life, sort of in your sort of 20s and sort of early 30s?
Well, even before that, really. Hip hop spoke to me because it wasn't dissimilar to punk in the sense that in that time it wasn't particularly aggressive, hip hop rap. It was more kind of like party-esque, I guess. And then we were listening to the old electro albums, right from the very beginning. Electro One, Captain Rock. Still, I love that tune, or Return of Captain Rock. And then it was around sort of 84 that I found my mother had cancer, and she ultimately died from cancer. But that was a very difficult time for me because I was kind of doing, picking my O levels, doing O levels, and I was a pretty good student, and then things just went to crap a little bit for me, to be honest with you. And by that time, I was already like writing and stuff, and then like painting. And getting into trouble and being brought back by the British Transport Police more times than I care to remember, or my dad would care to remember.
Yeah.
And and I guess hip hop just spoke to me really. It was it still had that fairly aggressive sound, that upbeat sound, and it just resonated with me and how I was feeling. And then I guess it was around, as I've said before, it was around the UTFO Roxanne Shante beef. And it was just kept on getting played and played and played. And I started drifting away from hip hop a little bit, and started getting into some other music, a bit of rock, whether it's Black Sabbath or you name it really, stuff like Canned Heat. Just hearing all this different stuff, stuff that I hadn't previously been sort of switched on to, and that sort of changed my musical influences, I guess, and even down to the way I dressed. But that was a short-lived thing. And then really by kind of 86, I was back into hip hop full blown. I mean, I'd always been buying hip hop. You know, Run DMC were just like, you know, it was on constantly. Run DMC. I mean, I remember being in Louis Shamar Price buying Rockbox on 12 inch. You know, and you know, with my precious pocket money at the time, and you know, that's just the stuff that I was into really in terms of buying records. Um, but my musical taste, you know, I was diverted slightly, but then I soon came back, and then really, I guess, you know, things like Paid in Full dropped and BDP, Criminal Minded, and then it just changed. You know, Public Enemy, you know, wow, you know, just blew up. Um, and then you know, hip hop became radically different and never really looked back after that. You know, and then of course NWA. I mean, I'd already been to see the Beastie Boys their first time they'd come over down at the Brighton Centre, and you know, and so yeah, I mean, never left hip hop entirely, but by 86, 87, I was back into it full blown again.
Yeah, it's amazing how many guests reference Public Enemy. You know, they've had
Really?
such a
Okay.
huge impact on pretty much everyone's life who's got any sort of sense of hip hop background or was
Oh,
born through that sort of time. You know, such an important band. You know, not artists.
hugely, hugely
Incredible.
influential. I mean,
Yeah,
Chuck, you know, I mean, you know, absolutely, you know, just a statesman, an ambassador, you know, but you know, bringing that knowledge to a hungry audience, you know, certainly over in the UK, but just you know, underpinned by just you know, Bomb Squad beats. I mean, God, you know, you know, anyone who was into hip hop, you know, just could not help but fall in love with Public Enemy.
yeah, yeah. So that's obviously the background. So then that's why you're so heavily into hip hop. And obviously you talked about writing as well, which is obviously the graph, and that's a big
Yeah,
part of the label, which we'll sort of get to probably next. But
sure.
before that, we were talking about before the show, and I was saying, well, you know, what was going on around the sort of pandemic time, and you explained that that's sort of when you sort of first got into beats, and that's what sort of indirectly or directly led to where you are now. So tell us a little bit about pandemic, just before the pandemic, you know, what you were doing musically and what you did sort of in lockdown and how it went forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I was living in Spain between 2015 and 2020, and I was running a company, you know, and it was going well. I had, in fact, taken my wife and my son over to Australia for a month, and we'd done a bit of Singapore, a bit of Thailand, a bit of Bali, etc. And I was there mainly for work, although we got some respite and holiday time in too. And then towards the end of 2019, um, you know, I said I think we should go to Australia for an extended period of time because I need to build up this aspect of my business. Um, so we agreed that we would go over to Melbourne first of all, spend 3 months in Australia, 1 month in New Zealand, and then do some more Southeast Asia. So we kind of like put everything in storage over there. And right at the end of February 2020, moved to the UK,
Right.
albeit 3 weeks before we made the dash to Australia. And and then yeah, I think we were like not even 10 days in, and we came down to Brighton to spend a long weekend with some friends, and they came rushing out as we parked up the car and said, "Quickly, Boris Johnson's about to make an announcement." And then yeah, lockdown, and we were homeless. You know, I mean, my we had planned to spend this 3 short weeks with my mother-in-law, and she was like, "I'm a cancer survivor. I'm over 70. You can't come back here." You know, and we couldn't go back to Spain because they were really draconian, and we had nowhere to actually go physically either. So we ended up sort of being homeless for a bit, you know, and sort of staying in the UK and just kind of like you know falling on friends, you know, just on their you know well, on their sofas most of the time. But yeah, it
That
was a
must
very
be
strange period.
really tough,
Yeah,
you know,
it was weird. I mean, to the
because you
point
didn't know
where
how long it was going to be for either. That's the thing, you know. It's like, is it going to be a
that's
week or two? And obviously, it ended up being months. But
well, exactly. And people in Australia that I've been speaking to are saying, look, if you're going to come now. We're about to close the border. And I just thought, well, that is the most responsible thing to do. Not with, you know, my son was about 6 then, I think. Um, and it just didn't make sense because you just didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, we're all in the dark around it. Anyway, we ended up finding a place, and part of what I was doing was magazine based, and exhibitions as well. Exhibitions obviously stopped everywhere around the world. Um, and a new media started coming in. So I started doing things like podcasts, and and the guy I was doing a podcast with said, how are you doing these? And I explained how I was, and he said, oh, we should try and record them on GarageBand. And being a Mac user, I had GarageBand for years, but I'd never actually used it.
Never used it. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
never used it,
Same
and I
here.
started mucking around with GarageBand, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, really. Um, and then started making beats, and then one thing led to another, and then it was Logic Pro, obviously, and then bringing other influences into it. Um, I'd always kind of like fancied myself as a bit of a rapper, I suppose. But if I'm truly honest, I'm not the best. So, but I got really obsessed with making beats, and that kept me sane during the lockdown period. And I came up with a concept album. I came up with a kind of like a nom de plume called Paleface Stormcrow, and I came up with this album called Trapped on Earth, and it's about an alien that crash lands on planet Earth, and he's intellectually above everyone else. I'm not saying that I am. That's where all similarities end. And then and to keep himself sane, he goes into crime and rapping. And,
Right.
uh,
Okay.
and so I came up with this whole like 14-track concept album, and I started just appreciating really making music, because I'd rapped before live and stuff, and I'd done a bit of DJing as well, not that much, but I'd never actually sat down and tried to actually craft a song from start to beginning, and be the full auteur of something. And I learned a lot from that, really. And I started following people on Instagram, started chatting to people on Instagram. Um, and then, I mean, I never had any aspirations of really releasing my music because I just didn't think it was up to scratch. Um, but I started chatting to people, and that is what led me to sort of becoming friends with the Cut Beatles.
So okay. So yeah, we'll talk that because I'll put the picture up because this is what you gave me when I saw you in Brighton on that second occasion.
That's right.
And at that time, I didn't really know anything about it. I knew it was going to be hip hop, but I listened to it and I was like, this is really different. This is really interesting. And every time I played it on a stream, people are like, this is great, So yeah, tell us about that then. So how you obviously met through Instagram, but how did that sort of progress to getting a 7 and then later an album as well?
Yeah, indeed. Um, that's the album.
Yeah.
Monkey Man by Curious and the Cut Beatles. Well, basically, I got chatting to J Man, one half of the Cut Beatles, and it's like, have you got anything on the boil? And he was like, yeah, always. And I was like, oh, I'd love to hear something. And he turned around and said, well, actually, I've got I've got something that we're sitting on, but we we don't really have an outlet for it at the moment. And I was like, right, okay, what's that? He said, well, off the record, we've done an album with Curious. And I was like, what, Curious George? And he was like, yeah, man. I was like, that's insane. I mean, I'm a massive MF Doom fan, so
Yeah.
Curious George is obviously someone I was very much aware of and have a huge amount of respect for. And and they secretively, gave me the link so I could listen to it, and I just said, this is fantastic. You've got to get this out. And he said, well, yeah, we feel the same way. And I said, well, look, let me see if I can help you. And something I hadn't mentioned previously. I mean, my cousin is Damien Harris, midfield general,
Yeah.
who
I know.
started Spint Records, and his brothers had a punk band back in the early day, and they gave me records, so they the influences came from there too. But I thought, well, I'll reach out to Damien and see what he thinks, and he said, yeah, look, I really like it, but it's not for my new label, which is called Vicious Charm. He's putting out some really great stuff. And and I thought, well, I'll approach another couple of people that I know who are strictly, you know, DJs and hip hop producers and have labels too. I won't mention names, And they said, yeah, look, it's fantastic. However, I don't have the bandwidth, or I just can't do it, or it doesn't fit with my roster.
Yeah.
So I just thought, oh, this is crazy. And I had kind of thought about starting a label. I mean, it was a bit of a pipe dream, but I was in a position where I could do. So I went back to them and said, look, this has brought it forward by several months. However, would it be worth me, presenting an offer to you? And they said, come back with something for sure. And then I was chatting with Curious, HP, and J Man of the Cut Beatles, and we agreed to go forward, and the rest is history, as they say. So the first release was June 2023, and that's the 7-inch that I gave you, and that's off the album. That's Monkeypox.
Yeah, crazy green neon record.
Green, yeah. And obviously Mpox is in the news now, so that's again kind of insane. And then on the 1st of September, we dropped the full album, which has repeatedly been sort of put forward as one of the top 10 hip hop albums of 2023.
Amazing. I'm just going to pause there. Going to say hello to a couple of people. I think we've got Syriac D6 in the house, and we've got Damon McDonald earlier. You mentioned Midfield General. Sam Tweaks is saying he'd love Reach Out by Midfield General to get a 45 release. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, reach out to me and I'll see what I can do for you.
Yeah, but let's also, because you've talked about graph, you've talked about art and all that. So, tell us a little bit about the artwork then as well, and how that came about for both the single and then obviously the album as well.
Yeah. So this one was done by HP, who's one half of the Cut Beatles, who's also an artist, and they just had a very clear vision of how they wanted it to look, and so it was HP who did that. And then a friend of mine had already come up with the logo. I mean, I'd come up with I'd gone through a whole list of names of what I could potentially call my record label, and this is even before, it was little more than a pipe dream, and Weaponize stuck with me, because, as I've said before, I wanted to. I like the idea of kind of like weaponizing music, making it tough. And I'm also a Ramal Z fan as well, both musically as well as graffiti. And he talked about arming his letters, giving them their own power so they could stand alone and they're impenetrable, And
Right.
I like that. So I kind of borrowed it a little bit, and thought, well, Weaponize Records, and it kind of works, to weaponize a record, Weaponize Records. And I put it with a Z because that's a graph thing, and just make it a little bit different too. And then
why did you go with the green? Why did you go with the green? It's a bit controversial. I personally, coloured vinyl isn't bad quality like it used to be. A few years ago, coloured vinyl was a real problem, but I don't think it's that wrong. But why did you go for deliberately that sort of colour?
Well, do you know what? We were going to go for glow in the dark originally, but glow in the dark is, infamous for its poor quality. I mean, you may get away with it on a 7, but on a 12, not that I've listened to it, but apparently Kylie Minogue put out an LP on glow in the dark, and I haven't listened to that. But I mean, the pressing plant just said, "Do you really want to do this?" And I was like, "Oh, why?" Because that sounds quite cool. Because we just thought the whole thing would just make it slightly different. The fact it's monkeypox, so this kind of like exploded pustule or something. That's why we went with the green, and for it to stand out. Whereas this is still sealed actually, but whereas this is 180 grams on black vinyl, and I just wanted this to thump, so that's why I went for 180 grams for starters, and I just kept it black. And well, actually, I was going to say the next vinyl release is going to be coloured vinyl. I wouldn't ordinarily do it, but it kind of suits the theme. I'll talk about that a bit later on. But but this piece of artwork, I mean, as you see it, it was designed by HP again of the Cut Beatles, but this came from a photograph of a Japanese fanboy who just loves hip hop, Takal, and he knows like Coco and stuff. I mean, they're really good friends, and he took this picture of the Bugatti hat on top of Monkey holding another monkey and referenced curious on it because of his first album, of course, Constipated Monkey. And then they just loved that, and then they just had some flourishes, and then that's how we ended up with that. I wasn't sure at first because I had been speaking to Dan Lish about doing the album cover, so I had a very clear idea of how I wanted it to look and the kind of standard I was going for because it was the first release and everything. But you know what? I wouldn't change anything really because that also references, Mad Villainy, So, it was
Yeah,
it just fitted, And
it's
and
amazing.
even if
Yeah.
I re-release it, I wouldn't change the cover. I don't think.
No, amazing. Come back to something in a minute. I'm going to say hello to Ed Bond. Good evening. Been a guest before on the show, and was part of my journey 45 episode compilation. You mentioned Coco. Obviously, one of the other times we met was up at the Coco gig at the Jazz Cafe. I think you were there.
Yes,
You were there at
indeed.
that one, weren't you? Yeah, yeah. I think we
Yeah,
met there, and I think you
we
saw
did.
Sam and Fade and a few of the other Twitch
Yeah.
community. But obviously, that one of the amazing. I've seen him a couple of times now, and that was pretty good. But what was your view of that night? Obviously, Mr. Thing was playing as well, and Coco. So, what was your experiences and memories of that event?
Well, one, it was an incredible night. It was on a personal level, it was fantastic because I rocked up wearing a white T-shirt of this version, and people just came up to me going, "Oh man, where did you get your Weaponize Records T-shirt from?" You know, as well, or people just coming up and going, "Are you anything to do with Weaponize Records?" So that was really humbling, I have to say. And it was really one big DJ's busman holiday, wasn't it? If we're
Yeah,
honest, I mean, just about every DJ who's worth their salt was there that night, and it was an incredible night. Um, I loved Coco. I love Coco, um, but Mr. Thing stole it for me.
that's exactly what Sam's saying. Yeah, Mr. Thing slayed it,
Yep,
and I
Sam and
think
I
he did. And
talked
it's
about it.
it's it's amazing that we got to see two such killer 45s DJs performing on the same bill. And obviously, Mr. Thing thinking, I've got to show up, I've got to show what I can do, and
Oh,
outdoing Coco. It's amazing.
oh, absolutely. And Mark's a super humble guy, and he
Yeah,
wouldn't say any of this. So I shouldn't speak out of turn because he's not here to kind of correct me or chuck in his 10 pence worth. But yeah, I would imagine secretly, whether he would admit it or not, he probably thought, right, I've got something to prove here, or certainly got to raise my game if he can. I mean, I don't mind admitting that I think Mark's probably the best DJ in the world. Um, he's certainly the one I like the most consistently,
yeah.
um, and I don't mind saying that at all. Um, so yeah, I mean, as much as I was looking forward to seeing Coco, but I think really, just Mark's style as well speaks to me more than the way Coco kind of beat juggles, and what he does is incredible, and you can't fault him. And a lot of
Yeah.
people say he's the best DJ in the world, and you can't really argue with that too much. You could probably put a Rizzler paper between him and Scratch Bastard and a few others, But I mean, there's some guys out there at the top of the game, and we just happened to have two that night that were just on fire.
And we're quite lucky. I mean, you mentioned Scratch Bastard. We're quite lucky, certainly in the Twitch community, that we're able to see DJs like Scratch Bastard, and obviously Mr. Thing was doing quite a lot of the Thing
Yeah,
Thursdays on Twitch.
excellent.
That because of what's happened with the pandemic and people getting onto this platform, and especially now it's been opened up to the DJ program, we've been fortunate to be able to see and become quite close to all of these people. It's been incredible. And for you, obviously, you're saying it's a DJ's busman holiday. For us, it was like a Twitch community
Yeah,
meetup. I met up with
yes,
Sam and Tommy and Danny, and we met up with Jim and had something to eat, went record shopping, and then went to the gig. So it becomes this whole community event, doesn't it? That's the
yeah,
other part of it.
absolutely. And that was a fantastic night. It was a great night. My only sort of regret is that I didn't book a hotel and stay out there longer really and make more of a day of it. So I had to sort of bounce out pretty quickly and get the Rattler
Yeah,
home.
yeah, that's the thing. Okay, let's talk about some more stuff to do with the label. Obviously, you talked about the first seven, but it's not just a vinyl label. Obviously, you put out CDs and cassettes.
Yes.
So the first one which I love and is still in my car, and my daughter loves it as well. She's always like, "Oh, can we listen to that Beatles CD?" And we listen to it all the time. Is an amazing. So, tell us a little bit about how that came about, and then also the fact that you're selling CDs and cassettes in
Yeah.
2024.
What did Money Shot call them?
What did he call it?
On these on when you interviewed him, obsolete format, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, obsolete format, obsolete format.
yeah.
I could
People
run
still buy them though, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, look, I mean, the way that came about is that I've been speaking to format, um, and you know, format's just got this worldwide, this global following, right? So, you know, he doesn't need me to put out records for him, and he never would put out a record on Weaponized Records or probably any other label because he just doesn't need us really.
Yeah,
It would just be taking a piece of the pie that he doesn't need to give to anybody else, which is completely cool. But what he said was, look, I do have this thing, um, and that was the Beatles songbook played by DJ Format. And he said, "Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, I've been thinking about putting out mixtapes or how I could do mixtapes, and this could be the first one of the series." And he sent it to me, and I listened to it, and I think within 3 minutes, I was messaging him just saying, "Yeah, we're doing it." And he was like, "Right, cool. Have you heard that?" I said, "No, I'm 3 minutes in." He said, "Well, wait till you get to the psychedelic bit, then come back." But no, I'm good with it all. I mean, I think it's a fantastic piece of work, and,
it's
and
genius.
I play it all the time. And my wife and my son, just like yours, are just like,
Yeah.
yeah, stick on the format CD.
And it's even to the extent that my wife likes it because she says it's better than the actual original Beatles songs. And I
Yep,
think in some terms, some of it is. And one, it's the Beatles. Two, it's Beatles covers because I love my cover versions. And Sam, Sam loves Beatles as well. But there's a couple of Beatles covers I've got that aren't on there, which is amazing. And I remember playing one of them, Count Basie at Southampton, which turned out to be Format's 50th birthday, which I didn't know till I sort of got there.
okay.
And I remember again him sort of looking over and hearing that. He's obviously heard it before, but it was really interesting to play that song before I had that mixtape. So, but he's such a lovely guy. Really
He's,
impressive.
yeah, nothing but love for Matt, and actually, I think he'd been waiting on some really super rare, and I can't remember what it is, some super rare cover, Beatles cover, obviously, from Japan. And I think we literally the CDs and the tapes rocked up, and I went round to his house and gave them to him. And he said, "Look, this turned up, and this is." I've been waiting for this for months, and I think since sort of pre-pandemic and stuff, he just thought he'd been lost, and he'd never get it, and then sure enough, it turned up. And he said, "I just wished I'd put this into it, but never mind. Maybe there'll be a version two. Never say."
Maybe, yeah, yeah. I mean, that'd be great.
People keep
But
asking me if I'm going to re-release it. Um,
because there was an initial release, wasn't there? That sold out very quickly, and then I think you did a very quick
oh, that
second
was in
pressing, which I
24
think is where
hours.
I caught because I missed it. I think first time, and I caught the
Yeah,
second pressing.
it was kind of
Um,
crazy, really. I mean, my son hadn't been very well around that time, and I I kind of took him to bed, and I was just sort of like lying on the bed with him and stuff. And I had my phone, and I a couple of hours made it live, and he was like, "Turn your phone off now," because my phone was just going ping, 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 ping. It
yeah,
sounded like a pinball machine. It was ridiculous. And then I woke up and we had sold out pretty much. So yeah, so I spoke to Format, and we decided to re-release it or do another run. We're able to do that and get it out before Christmas and stuff. So yeah, I mean, and people keep saying, "Look, will you re-release it? Will you re-release it?" I mean, I get messages nearly every other day, people asking me, "Will I re-release it?" And I've spoken to Matt about it, and the way we feel, certainly at this stage, is, well, look, that way it's kind of poetry. If you were there in the moment and you caught it, fantastic.
definitely. Yeah, yeah,
Double thumbs up. If you missed out, sorry. And just for the record, no, you're not going to get any of the mixtapes on download, and they
yeah,
won't be streamed either because they are ILL legal. So
yeah.
I'm not going to put my head over the parapet, and get sniped. So that's why we don't do streaming. That's why we don't do downloads, because I couldn't even probably sell them to people, or even if I did put them free, then I opened myself up. I shouldn't probably admit this, but I mean, anyone who knows anything about music and sampling and
Yeah,
music,
I mean, we know a lot about it on Twitch because they've just launched the DJ
well,
program, and you can
yeah,
only play copyrighted
indeed.
music, and there's certain things you can't play. You know, there's a lot going on. But again, it comes back to that sort of
And I can't put them
collect.
out on vinyl, Criztoz, either, because they're all sort of 60 minutes. So what you're going to do, 15 minutes of a mix, turn it over, 15 minutes of a
Yeah,
mix, then get the second plate, play side C, 15 minutes, flip it. It doesn't work.
no one's going to do that now.
That's why I put out tapes and CDs.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Talking about the tapes, then, are people buying them to actually listen to them, or are they buying them to like just sit on a shelf like I've got the Coco tape up there because I haven't got a cassette player?
Well,
Do you know if people are actually physically listening to these
yeah, I mean, I've been
cassettes?
seeing reels and stuff of people, playing their tapes. I'd like to think just about everybody who buys the tapes I listen to. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, some guy in America said, "I want to buy like 10 of these. This is the format one." And I said, "You can't have 10. You can have one."
Yeah,
It's like, "Why can't I have 10?" I said, "Because I want them to go into the hands of people who want to listen to it,
yeah, yeah,
not dealers or people who are going to sit on it, then put it on, I don't know, Discogs and try and sell it for 60 quid or whatever a few months
yeah,
down
yeah,
the line." So I'm pretty focused like that. I do want the music to get into the hands of people that love it and enjoy it and want to get the whole collection. And the only way I guess we will do this one again is if I relaunch it as a box set. So there's a
okay,
chance that it may come out again as a box set,
okay, could
but
be
we'll
interesting.
wait and see.
Yeah, wait and see. And I guess it's also tough to sort of go back and redo stuff that's already come out when you're putting out fresh material and fresh artists and fresh mixtapes, isn't it? That's the other
Yeah,
thing because it's running running any business, it's constantly the new, and certainly in music, it's right. What we launching at the moment, what we pushing, what we doing, and it's difficult to then go back and launch again something from before, isn't it?
it is. I mean, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't see it as sort of going backwards, but I mean, you're certainly right in terms of moving forwards. And I mean, I get sent so much stuff now. It's incredible. And I mean, the label hasn't even been going for 18 months, so
Yeah,
not really. And so it's incredible, really, how how kindly people feel about the label. Firstly, and secondly, how many people just hit me up saying, "Oh, can I give you artwork? Or will you look at my artwork for one of your releases?" Or um, listen to this and tell me what you think of it. And sometimes you have to have some difficult conversations, and other times you just turn around and say, "Right, send me it on a WAV file because I'm going to go and send it off to be mixed and mastered."
yeah, amazing, amazing. Okay, let's talk about another couple of the releases. Sorry, excuse me.
Not at all.
You referenced Money Shot. We had DJ Money Shot on the show a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. And this is his mixtape, which came out called Ultimate Fakes and Tweaks. I don't think he's referencing Sam Tweaks here, but it's there. But yeah, tell us about that. How did that connection come about? How did that mixtape come
Yeah,
out?
well, I mean, again, social media it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Really, and I kind of connected a little bit with Roy with Money Shot on Instagram, and then funnily enough, I did a competition and he won a copy of Monkeypox, the 7-inch single, um, and then before I'd even released the Beatles songbook, I'd come up with the sort of the idea that Weaponize Records were going to release a series of mixtapes, and obviously there's people in my mind who I'd like to be part of that series, and Money Shot, the king of the mixtape, was on that list. So I asked him, and he said, "Do you know what? Yeah, I'd love to, and I've even got an idea." And I'm generally humbled again, by some of the people I've reached out to and their responses to this. They've said, "Look, love to, but I'm not able to do it. But keep hitting me up." Or, "Yes,
Yeah,
most definitely, I'd like to do one." So just watch this space. But I mean, ultimate Fakes and Tweaks is just an absolute blinder of a mixtape. If you haven't heard it, you have to hear it. It is just ridiculously good. I mean, I shouldn't really talk about favorites, you know. I mean, but it's certainly up there, you know. I mean, I generally don't have a favorite. I keep on thinking I have a favorite, then I hear the next one, I think, oh, maybe that's my favorite, you know. And that they're all different. They all come with a different sort of DNA and a different slant, you know. And that's what makes them genuinely interesting and exciting to listen to and own.
Is putting out CDs, obviously there's a cheaper format, isn't it, to sort of put
It
out
is.
than vinyl? So does that mean there's less of a risk as well, and you're perhaps prepared to sort of take a bit more of a chance on a mixtape than you would obviously putting out a record?
Yeah, I mean there is some of that. I mean, but then there's the, you know, there is the reason. It's the only format I could have done it on.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean you couldn't do like
Without
vinyl like we've already
streaming or
discussed. Yeah,
download. So that kind of forced my hand really. But yes, it is cheaper to put out a tape. But I mean, I don't charge ridiculous money for the tapes or the CDs. I mean, like the next one is 80 minutes of you know, just 51 years of hip hop in chronological order. You know, so that's 80 minutes of music for £10.
yeah.
And if you're in the UK, then 350 postage. You know, so that ain't a bad thing really. In my book.
Well,
And so
let's look at
I'm
that
able
one
to get
because
music out to people who want to buy it, you know, at a
yeah,
fair price.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's look at that one because that's coming out tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow, 4 o'clock,
And that's Delightful live at the Farewell. You said it's like 80 minutes of
80 minutes.
51 years of hip hop, but from what I was looking at today, it's recorded live, wasn't it?
It's recorded live. So the hype video, what I've done, I got a live recording of him actually mixing it up, but I've mixed up what I saw on the video with what's been mixed and mastered. So it's properly mixed and mastered, but we kept the crowd participation in there as well because we wanted a live mixtape, you know, and yeah, we just felt it was apt really because you know he is you know, a cut to cut, a DMC and IDA world champion, and he's given up DJing, professional DJing. He's now going to become a bedroom DJ,
Right.
which is crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, we've had the same with Boca 45 recently as
Yes,
well. Sort of
indeed.
saying after
Absolutely
25
right.
years, I'm going to retire. Um, I don't know. Maybe it's just, you know, people who've been artists want to just say, right, that's what I've achieved. I want to go out on a high and not sort of potentially not fade into obscurity, but you know what I mean? You know, if you carry on and carry on, the pressure, I guess, to be a certain level and do a certain thing must be quite hard for these professional DJs.
Yeah, I'd accept that, and I think that may have you know, something to do with some people's decisions. Certainly, I mean, again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but with Dell, you know, he's just kind of done with the whole kind of Instagram thing. And it's like, you know, you speak to a lot of people, and it's like, I put so much effort into this, you know, and then you get like 8 likes, you know, and, you know, you're talking about someone who's at the top of his game, you know, and just feeling as though that he's just, you know, under this, you know, avalanche that is social media and trying to wade through it to get to the top, you know. And it's tough. I mean, I've spoken to, like, you know, other DJs, and they're talking about, you know, expectations of payment, you know, to go and do like a 2 hour mix or something, you know, a 2 hour set, you know, and it's like, you know, 50 quid. It's like, yeah, I don't think so. You know, it's becoming so, and you've just got a lot of glorified button pushers these days as well. You know, the music's got better. You know, sorry, the equipment's got better, I should say, in terms of beat matching and stuff. You know, it's just, you know, you push a few buttons and make it sound really good. The kind of DJing I might do, Criztoz. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting
Unlike
because
the likes of Sam Tweaks and you know,
yeah,
One of a Kind and Mark Bowles and DJ Coco.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because obviously a lot of the people I watch are 45s DJs, but then I also follow a lot of some of the up and coming DJs who are all on digital because obviously my daughter does a bit of DJing, so I sort of show her what's going on there, and people like James Hype and things like that. And you're like,
Yeah,
yeah, it is button pushing, but that's just entertainment. That's just
yeah,
performance. But again, so much pressure. You know,
yeah. No, sure.
it's crazy. But again, you know, even someone
Headphones.
like yeah, you need teams into it. Like, you know, someone like James Hype has got a team of people filming him, a team of people editing it, some people doing the social media, and that's what you need, I think, if you're going to get anywhere near the top these days. You know, but
Yes.
you know, trying to do it on your own, which a lot of hip hop DJs, DMC champions, because they're big in our scene, but they're not big in sort of mainstream. It becomes really difficult, and yeah, I can sort of see why they're all sort of thinking, right, let's end it on a high and do it on our terms.
Yeah, no, sure, and I'm sure that plays a big part of people's decisions. But it's still a shame, a crying
Yeah,
shame to see some of these, extremely talented people have been in our psyches for a very long time, and you know, rocked our worlds, so to speak. Disappearing or bowing out, should we say?
yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it's like bands sort of. Well, I mean, you got Oasis reforming, haven't you? But it's the same with bands, isn't it? No, but bands obviously go through periods where they're big, and then they sort of stop, and then they sort of reform and come back. So maybe some of these DJs will come back and do like
I think with Oasis, I mean, I think they're like 25 years are up, and then all the rights go back to them, to their
right,
music. So it's a nice way for them to, sell their whole catalogue for a couple of billion or whatever.
yeah,
Plus,
yeah,
the fact, I think Noel just divorced his wife, and she took 25 million off him, so he probably needs to
it
boost the
needs that
bank
money.
balance a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll move on from Oasis.
Personal lines, or stuff that you've heard on children's television programs with a bit of heavy rock guitar behind it. Go and see Oasis for 400 quid. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's talk about one more release on the thing. On the label.
Sam's
Um,
just asked.
oh, Sam did ask. Yeah. Why was there
Yeah,
no cassette
sorry. Was
for
there
the
no
mic?
cassette for the Mike the Hat one? Unfortunately, there wasn't. And I'll explain why. Um, Dan Lish did us a solid on the artwork, but there was no way that we could really adjust the artwork and make it look good on a tape format. And if we had done that, and he had loads of things on the boil, and he was promoting his book again as well. So that would have just slowed down the whole project. So we just unfortunately agreed that we wouldn't do a tape for Mike DeHat's one. But categorically moving forward, every Weaponized mixtape series release will come in tape and CD format.
Fantastic. Talking about artwork as well.
Yeah,
This one just it's just amazing. I loved it. So tell us a little bit about this one.
yeah. Well, I mean, you know, this was in the early days. Actually, I mean, I'd already agreed to start the label, and I'd already agreed and signed a contract with Curious and the Cut Beatles. So that was moving forward, and then I suddenly heard this guy, and I'm not sure. I mean, I got onto his SoundCloud account, and I heard Old Boy Green. I was like, yeah, wow, man, I really like this guy's style. And if I'm honest with you, I didn't know anything about Old Boy Green at the time. Shamelessly, I have to say. Um, but I said to him there and then, would you like to work on something? He said, well, I'm actually working something, and Michael Parkinson's, producing it. I was like, well, okay, that sounds like it's a must. And then Junior Disparal's on there, Joker Star as well. Um, a few other recognisable and well-respected rappers are on that release. But UK hip hop is tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. The reason I released that on CD, why we agreed to release it on CD, because we just weren't sure really, if there was the appetite for it to be on vinyl. And as we discussed earlier, it's expensive. Vinyl is expensive. If you're going to commit to vinyl, you have to feel assured that you're going to sell X amount of units, and that's just the break even. That's not
Yeah.
even a profit. And that's the reality of record labels these days, especially UK independent hip hop, labels such as Weaponize Records. You have to count the beans, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, and especially with costs going up, and
They should have
it's
come
not.
down. They should have come down, but they haven't.
No,
You
of
know.
course not. It's like it never does it?
Well, of course it doesn't.
You know.
Once they've got you paying like £1.50 for a litre of petrol,
Yeah.
why bring it
Exactly.
much below sort of 139?
Yeah, yeah. So let's sort of end on the future then. So
Yeah,
can you talk about maybe one or two projects that you've got coming up in
I
the near
can,
future?
I can. Right. So Weaponized mixtape series. The next one is Delightful, and that drops tomorrow. We've talked about that. That's number 6. Number 7 is our man with the plan, Sam Tweaks. The Dragon Awakens. And Sam, should I tell him a little bit about your mixtape? I'm going to take
Ooh,
that as a yes.
it's
Yeah,
just a little bit, a little
go
teaser.
ahead. Yeah, put it this way, it has a Welsh theme, and it's eclectic and it's amazing and it's out of the box, and I absolutely love it, and I can't wait to put that out. So that will be coming out in late October, early November. We talked about Rival Self earlier. We're dropping a Rival Self, sort of a sideline project. It's not a Weaponized mixtape, but it's coming out on CD, and it's coming out on CD and on tape, and it's coming out on Halloween. And that's
Amazing. Oh my God.
that's all around. It's all around video nasties. You're going to love that one. And then I've got Jack Decks coming out on vinyl, and that's got the TPs.
I think we've got Jack Decks watching, or was watching, on Instagram actually.
There we go.
Yeah.
Jack Decks, that's his TP, and that's got Stinking Slumrock, Tangleman Dan, Temp Dam, Caesar Crow, Citizen Nugs, Mize Diggy on there.
Wow.
You may have heard Summertime. We released that early for the non-existent summer. And then I've got Jaguar Skills coming out with Weaponized Mixtape Volume 8 just in time for Christmas. Christmas will never be the same again. I haven't heard it yet. I'm just hoping it is coming in. And then 2025, the next one, Weaponized Mixtape Series number 9, volume number 9, will be Andy Smith.
Wow.
And I've got quite a few other cats in line, people I'm speaking to. And then I've got an album coming out in 2025 by Dangerous Creatures, and that's called Dead Earth 1.0. And that is Mimsky Beats out of Berlin with King Kashmir. And that's got people like Capo on it. It's got Big Just from Company Flow on it. It's got Jazz T on it. So, yeah, a lot of good things coming out of the Weaponized camp.
Incredible. And obviously that's the next 6 to 9 months worth. Is that about the sort of time that you sort of work forward?
Yeah, let's call it 6 months. Yeah. Okay. But there'll probably be more coming out as well in between. Yeah, I mean, look, it's just a case of keep putting out really good music and building up a catalogue, and hopefully people will come back and buy it. And I can't let you go without saying, if you haven't heard this, Chronicles of Nefaria by Il Sykes and Relens, go give it a listen. It's now on like streaming platforms. So anyone who doesn't want to buy a £20 EP that lasts 33 minutes, you're crazy. But yeah, you go and listen to it on your preferred streaming platform. We haven't talked about streaming platforms. Probably best I don't. Yeah, go give it a listen, because it's absolutely fire and it's so radically different. And yeah, probably the best project to come out of the UK in 2023.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, it's been great. It's been really good finding out a lot more about what's going on. I'm just going to have a quick look and see where we can go next. Let me have a quick look. Oh, we can go and listen to some reggae, I think. Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on. Lots of exclusive...
I haven't bored people, and it hasn't been too sort of,
No, not at all. I don't think so. You haven't bored me, so that's the main thing. I've enjoyed it, and yeah, lots of exclusive news as well, as Sam Tweaks says. And obviously a lot of people looking forward to the label. The link's been in the chat to Instagram. That's probably the best sort of HQ to find the label. There's also the website as well, isn't there? And obviously, yeah, pick up, if you're going to go and pick up one, get some of the other mixtapes.
I'm going to give away a free TP to the Jack Decks project, and it's an advanced one, because I'm going to have to probably send this back. Well, not send it back, but get a new stamper done, because it's got a couple of crackles on there. We want it to sound as best and fresh as it can. So we'll work
out something, and maybe we'll do an Instagram drop or something. Maybe
let's do an Instagram drop. But I'll give one of these away free of charge and send it anywhere in the world.
Yeah, cool. I'll put up a reel or something later
Let's
this
work
week.
something out after the show. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
All right.
Fantastic. But yeah, let's go see DJB. If you just hang on there for a minute, Guy, we'll have a quick chat after the show. But thank you everyone for tuning in. It will be on Mixcloud and also on YouTube if you want to watch it back or missed any of it. But yeah, thanks again. And
Pleasure.
thanks everyone for being here.
And thank you, everyone who tuned in.